there was an area that the East Branch of Delaware ran through, and there were some fields and some overgrown plants and really not much else. And there was a vision to restore that area to what it once was, which was an elegant park at the turn of 2 centuries ago. And Peg was instrumental in leading that vision. And a lot of that had to do with how she rallied the community and, of course, the resources of the people involved in the community themselves. But since that day, back in 1998, I think it was, Kirkside Park has become a showpiece for the Catskills, the region, the state, and it was actually recognized nationally. And maybe Peg will talk about that. So one of the reasons that it is recognized, and most of us know it so well, is because it exemplifies what we call heritage tourism, which is one of the cards that the Catskills can play more. And Roxbury has really led that example. Since Peg's involvement in that project, she's moved on to be the executive director of the MARC project. And I think she's going to speak to us a lot about that today. So thank you, Peg, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Peter. That was very gracious of you. Marty, no heckling in the back. I will not tolerate it. Same thing with you, Mayor Morrell. What I'd like to kind of touch base on is rural preservation corporations. That's what the MARC project is. There are several throughout the regions, in your counties, things like that. There's actually a list on the back table. But when I first took this job, I heard within the first 2 weeks, so what does the MARC project do? And I realized that I didn't have any kind of document to really explain what we do, because it's broad and diverse. And as a 501c not-for-profit corporation, we have sister organizations, but we're recognized by the state as a rural preservation corporation, and that didn't really kind of speak to everything we do. We're a community development organization. And so that being said, we do everything from helping communities plan, but really helping them to realize their long-term community goals. This is an example of Russell's store in Bovina. They were looking to do some work on the store, but had nothing to kind of go on. So we solicited some funding for them, and it got matched by a local Bovina resident to put together a plan on energy loss as well as architectural significance. And now they have a map to follow to do what needs to be done with that building. So we also deal with affordable housing. These are 2 MARC-owned properties. The one on the right is strictly senior citizens, and the one on the left is co-managed with a firm up in Syracuse called 2+4, but that's another 32 units, 16 seniors, and 16 residential families. And we deal with Main Street revitalization. This is an example of a partnership between the 3 Delaware County Rural Preservation Corporations, Delaware Opportunities, Western Catskills, and the MARC Project. We were able to collectively take this 4-unit dilapidated historic structure on Main Street, Roxbury, and turn it into beautiful, affordable housing and recognize its historic integrity. So by working with our sister organizations, we were able to put together the funding resources to make that happen.
Okay. Could I? MARC, M-A-R-K, was originally Margaretville, Arkville.
Correct.
But it seems like you've expanded, so maybe for everybody here,
sure.
What is your range?
Our range now is the town of Andes, the town of Bovina, the town of Roxbury, the town of Middletown, the villages of Margaretville and Arkville. We have got our fingerprints taken and crossed the border into Pine Hill to provide a little bit of technical assistance up there, and we often collaborate with Western Catskills to go into Hawkett Center, because they actually have to go through us to get to Hawkett Center. It doesn't make much sense. but you tell that to the state. So it did start, it was 33 years old. It started after a devastating fire on Main Street, Margaretville. A group of community members got together and formed this 501c3 for the purposes of community development needs. So all rural preservation corporations don't always follow the same blueprint, but they're all there to help. And they're often the clearinghouse for information and resources that I think helps municipal leaders really get a handle on what's available to them. From CWC programs to chamber programs to tourism programs, we can kind of help take that ball of wax and put it into one basket. In many cases, Mark will help community organizations with their programs and events. Look at those adorable children. That's Mayor Morell's and Todd Pasquarella's daughters there at one of the Fleischmann's events. And we also work with these community organizations in the delivery of other public programs. And these public programs greatly contribute to the cultural fabric of our communities, which is about the quality of life. And as municipal leaders, quality of life should be critical to your constituencies. We help business with grassroots economic development. We often direct them to CWC. We help guide them through process. We have our own economic development programs that we run. I think Western Catskills goes about it a different way, Delaware Ops a different way, but it doesn't mean that, you know, we're always talking to each other. So we know where to send people. In fact, right after the flood hit, Velga got sent to us to help answer the phones. Linda Strategos over at Western Catskills just said, let me send you somebody. So we're here to help and we work together. These contribute to community pride. The upper left-hand slide is a public art project that we were behind. It was called The Doors of Roxbury. The musicians on the right were a concert series that we received funding and sponsored over in Valentine Park. The tap dancers down in Fleischmann's was part of the Fleischmann's community event. And those beautiful pumpkins and mums are at Qualter's Garden and Marketplace. And we're also helping with small business development. We've been on board to help the folks at the Roxbury with their third expansion now. There's all kinds of different ways. That lower right-hand slide is a Main Street revitalization project. You should have seen the building before it was taken on. So, we provide assistance. We as an RPC provide assistance to owner-occupied home repair. We currently have a program open in the town of Middletown. And we just received a rental rehabilitation assistance program for our entire service area. So that's for above storefront rental assistance to property owners. We have a small development business fund. This was flood related, a contribution by a part-time resident to go directly into business development grants and flood relief in the town of Middletown. And again, the rental rehabilitation program. We also have been running a business revolving loan fund for about 20 years. It's a small piece of loan funding that can often help flush out any kind of gap financing or something that maybe CWC, you know, can't address immediately, or it's a real quick application process, things like that. We run homebuyer assistance programs, as does Western Catskills and Delaware Opportunities. Those are for homeowners, first-time homeowners. They're required to go through courses, things like that, but we help them get into a home. And we provide technical assistance to startup organizations. We've been working with Fleischmann's First, with the Catskill Mountain Artisans Guild. Anyone who pretty much thinks they have an idea, we try to work with them and get them over to the next level of their careers. We also, community development block grants We have one open now in the town of Middletown for owner-occupied home repair. But these are often, we help communities with their microenterprise and CDBG applications. County Economic Development is also very active in the microenterprise component in Delaware County. I believe in Ulster as well, but you can call RUPCO if you're in Ulster County. They're your Rural Preservation Corporation, as is the SHARP Committee. We run New York Main Street programs when we're fortunate enough to get them funded, but we're fairly tenacious. If we file an application for Main Street and it doesn't get funded, we call the state and ask why, and then we go back the next year. Fleischman's has an open Main Street program now. We just closed one out for Margaretville about a year and a half ago, but they are about to see some additional Main Street funding through the county. We've been working with County Economic Development on that program. And the second phase of Roxbury Main Street was just funded. Again, rental assistance programs. We do not do rental assistance, but Delaware Opportunities does. I don't know if Western Catskills Delaware Opportunities is the one for Delaware County. And as Peter alluded to, we help with tourism promotion and community events, and we're always happy to do that. That's the fun stuff. So there you have it. You guys are awful quiet. Any questions? Good. Oh, Julia.
What are you doing with the flood?
We've been the conduit for flood relief money, which has been one really important reason to support your rural preservation corporations, because we had the infrastructure in place to not only receive the money, but to redistribute it, because we have the applications for home repair. We know how to run the program. We have a housing rehabilitation specialist. We've been dealing with everything from sanitizing cellars to making sure that these families are living in a good environment. And we also provided direct emergency relief funds to business. And that was an application process. There was a panel that reviewed the applications. We did some inspections, and we paid direct to the contractors rather than the homeowners. So it's another really good reason to support your rural preservation corporations, because we certainly don't get a lot of support on the state level. We rely a lot on private contributions in our work in municipalities, so. Jan.
Could you say a little bit about the micro-enterprise program? What is that, and how does it work? Give some examples.
The micro-enterprise program is funded through the Community Development Block Grant. It is on the county level, County Economic Development in Delaware County. I don't know if Ulster has one active now, but it's likely through their ED. And it's usually $25,000 to a business of 5 or less employees. It doesn't usually fund construction costs. There could be an opportunity for someone to do something, but that somebody isn't there. Or that somebody is there and takes that opportunity, but the basis in which that opportunity can grow doesn't have the people here to grow it. So that's why I think tourism programs and bringing people to the region are critical, because we have untapped resources, our recreation, our scenic beauty, our historic resources that can be more user-friendly. Yeah. And we need to get together on that page. There's a lot of effort out there to do that, but we need to get everyone on board with that. It's cross-county, it's truly a regional, it needs to be a regional goal. We've got to blur the lines, not strengthen them.
Yeah, I agree. In a way, it's a chicken versus the egg argument.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, and that's the hardest thing we're all trying to overcome.
Yeah.
What do you do first? I know that in Roxbury, you have a great project like the Roxbury Motel.
Yeah.
They fill the place 6 days a week, sometimes 7, and there's no retail.
Yeah.
So, it's forever. So do how do you spark that next fire?
Has there ever been a discussion about some kind of joint economic development group, community economic development group? Because I think one of our problems is that we're defined by, all the definition is by counties, but that's not how we live. We don't live.
No, we don't live by
that
county
way.
lines. And if you talk to Carol O'Byrne from the Central Catskills, if you talk to any of the county TPAs, they understand that, but there does need to be some directive in some regional branding that, which has been tried before, but we need to get back to the table again together. Because again, we need to, sorry if anyone's from Vermont, we need to close those gates. We have better maple syrup, we have better skiing, I could go on and on, so there you have it.
Actually, that last point, I think, was an excellent transition to today's keynote speaker. We're very happy and excited that Kate Fish, Executive Director of the Adirondack North Country Association, is here. And Katie Palm and I had the opportunity to go out to dinner with Kate last night and speak about some of the issues and the opportunities. And what came up again and again were all the similarities between the Catskills and the Adirondacks and the North Country. Yes, there are many differences, but there are so many similarities. To parks, we struggle with outmigration of youth, as they do. We're working on scenic byways projects to promote those qualities. They're working on them and really are doing an extraordinary job. And like us in the Catskills, and this is the part where the transition comes in, there are so many organizations, and they're each slightly different in mission, and one's over here and one's over there. And how do we come together and find common ground? Because there's such a richness of talent and assistance here. What is it that we can work on that'll help us improve in that area? And I'm really looking forward to what Kate has to say on all of these things. So thank you for making the trip from the Adirondacks. We really appreciate it.
I was in Albany for the announcement, and it makes me cry because we worked so hard on it, but we were one of the winners in the North Country. So we got $103.2 million for a region that is usually overlooked by the state. Our population is 433,000 people. And I was trying to run calculations last night, and I think that's the equivalent of $238,000 a person for the Adirondacks versus what New York City got, which is the equivalent of $8 a person. So it proves to me that even if you're rural, and even if you feel forgotten, that you can make some of these things happen. So anyway, it was a labor of a huge amount of work on the part of a number of people. Very collaborative, east to west. So anyway, celebrating that, and I am a little hoarse because I was being very politically incorrect yesterday, in the Hart Theater with about 1,000 people when the North Country was announced, just like, woohoo! Anyway, so I am really delighted to be here today, and it's so much fun and interesting to see what similarities there are, as Peter was saying, between the North Country, between the Adirondacks and the Catskills. And so I hope I can share some things with you that that are helpful, and also learn some things from you. I wanted to say, I'm going to talk about basically two things. One is ANCA, what we do, the kinds of programs that we're involved with, our reach. We are beyond counties. We actually have 14 counties in our region, which is a lot of land, a lot of territory, and I think that's been one of our strengths because we're seen as an organization that works across counties and doesn't get stuck at those county lines, which are not visible to anybody except for governments. The second thing I want to talk about, based on our conversation last night, is something that we started in the Adirondacks about 5 years ago, and it could be a really interesting model for you. You talk about common ground and needing to find common ground. And we've got something called the Common Ground Alliance, which has been going on. Very interesting development out of that. Governor Cuomo just appointed Lonnie Ulrich as the new chair of the Adirondack Park Agency. First time a woman has been appointed. So at this point, there's a woman in charge of the APA and the woman as the executive director of the APA. I was gratified to see so many women in the room today. An article came out by Brian Mann, who's one of our North Country Public Radio reporters, when after Lonnie was appointed, saying that it seems that women are becoming the decision makers in the park. And he listed a whole number of women who were in leadership positions across, you know, running businesses, running the regional hospital, running the press, et cetera, Adirondack Life, Adirondack Enterprise, just went on and on. The women who represent us in Albany, it was quite phenomenal to hear that. Anyway, Lonnie was the founder of the Common Ground Alliance, and that was kind of the main thing that was referenced in what she did, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why she was appointed as the new APA commissioner. The article that was in the Enterprise and also on NCPR quoted Ross Whaley, who's one of our wise people in the park. He always said that in the Adirondacks we'd rather fight than win. And that probably sounds very familiar to you. And then at the end of so he was quoted in that in the article, and then at the end, Brian Mann said, but maybe that was just a guy thing. So, so anyway, and I pardon the font, for some reason the font that I had for this doesn't come through, but anyway, it's a very minor detail. The North Country, our region is 14 counties. We're 38% of the land area of the state of New York and only 6.4% of the population. This is the region. You can see that the Adirondack Park is a big, can everybody see if I'm standing a little bit to the side? The Adirondack Park, you can see it, you know, is a big chunk of that land area, and as is the Tug Hill Plateau. And the Adirondack Park is, as you know, it's a 6 million acre park. It's the largest park south of the Canadian border by orders of magnitude. And about 49% is owned, and we always say not owned by the state, but owned by the people of the state of New York. Because I think when you think about this land ownership as owned by the people as opposed to the state, it kind of changes your attitude. So now when I'm out, I hike every morning in the on my land across the road, that says protected wilderness area. I feel a sense of ownership as opposed to something else. So language is important. So we always say owned by the people of the state. So ANCA is a not-for-profit corporation founded in 1955. People started to meet. There were a final meeting of about 300 people, and I said, we need to have an organization that represents the interests of the park, pretty much the commercial interests of the park. You know, how do we promote tourism? How do we promote the assets of the park? That cute little guy up in the corner is Roger Tubby. He was one of the founders. He was Truman's press secretary, and then came up, lived in the Adirondacks, and owned the Adirondack Enterprise, or started that. So ANCA's been around for a long time. One of the first big projects that ANCA became known for was the helping to change the state constitution to allow for the Northway to go through state-owned land. So, we've been involved in transportation and advocating for transportation infrastructure and all of that for a long time. So I've tried to get some impacts. It's kind of hard to quantify. So what's the impact of our organization? And since 2000, we've received about $12.7 million in federal and state funding, including a lot of money in byways grants. I hope everybody picks up a map. We've got a map of the byways at the back of the room, so it's yours to take. If you open it up, on one side, it's the first state byways map that ANCA produced. I think we printed about 300,000 copies. On one side is just the Adirondack North Country, because that's where most of the byways are. And on the other side of the map is the state maps. And you can see in the Catskills there's a lot of action in scenic byways when you look at the map. So excluding the byways funds, we calculate our impact to be about $45 million in economic activity in the region. With the byways programs, because it's marketing dollars and all that, there's a different conversion ratio. And that brings our impact over the last 10 years to up to $274 million in economic activity in the region. We are one of those organizations that tries to bring money from the outside and spend it locally. So that's one of the things that we think is very important. We serve almost all the communities in the North Country. In the Adirondack Park, we have 103 towns and villages. In the overall region, there are more than that. Peter, I think somebody mentioned partnerships as being an absolutely key element of future activities. Partnerships are the way we work. We are a very small organization. We could not do the work that we do without doing that in partnership with experts, with other community-based organizations, etc. So anyway, partnerships are critical. And we serve a lot of businesses and individuals through our programs. One of the things I wanted to talk about is we do have an artisan support program, and this will be our 26th year of doing something called Buyer Days. We're trying to figure out a better term for it. But what it is it's a 2-day event in Saratoga Springs, where we have a juried process that selects local or regional artisans who bring their wares, whether they are maple syrup, food, local wine, etc. There's one guy that I just love. He makes these little wooden trucks that are just absolutely great. And they set up for 2 days, and we bring local buyers in. So it's a way of bringing artisans together with retail shops, etc. And that's brought a lot of money into the hands of local artisans. I've been the executive director for almost 2 years. I can't believe it's gone that fast. One of the first things I did is we redid our strategic plan. We looked at our vision statement, we looked at our mission statement, and basically started from, rewrote it. So, just in terms of revitalizing the organization. So our vision is vibrant rural communities and resilient local economies where people and businesses thrive in a cherished environment, which is very much what you have here. And we are essentially rural. Our mission, to catalyze sustainable economic development across the North Country and enhance the quality of life of the people who live, work, and visit here. And we do that by fostering conditions necessary for business development, managing programs that increase regional and local self-reliance, developing projects and partnerships that support business development, spotlighting the extraordinary, and you have the same thing here, extraordinary natural, cultural, and historic assets of the region. And we advocate for the region at the federal and state level. So that's what we do, and it's, rewriting the mission. Everything that we do, every program that we take on, this is the litmus test. Does it do these things? If it doesn't do these things, we won't take it on. So we've got 3 interrelated goals around which we organize our programs. Resilient local economies. So we've just launched in the last year a pretty comprehensive energy program. And that's all about making our region, our communities more self-reliant, keeping energy dollars in the communities, increasing efficiency of buildings, etc. I'll go into a little more detail on that. Vibrant communities. The scenic byways work that we do fosters connections between communities. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's been a very powerful way of creating connections between communities. And then recognizing how phenomenal the place where we live, where we are lucky enough to live, and you have the same thing here, how we have exceptional assets in the region, and that's one of the things that we highlight. So we undertook, when I took over as the executive director, I looked at the programs, and we went out and did a survey of about 75 key stakeholders representing all of our constituencies. We said, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? Where are our weaknesses? Where are our strengths? And where should we go in the future? And based on that, we came back have kind of reaffirmed, but also clarified our program areas. So we do business and community development, and that actually cuts across everything else that we do. Comprehensive program in energy, and that's been exciting just because it's been, you know, one of the things that I've cared about, that I've brought to the table, and it's great to see that program growing by leaps and bounds, by megawatts and kilowatts, or kilowatts and megawatts. We have a program in agriculture working towards a much more resilient local food economy. We also work directly with farmers on helping them transition from grain-fed to grass-fed for livestock. So that's been the forest economy. We've kind of moved towards working on how do we build a biomass-based economy in the North Country, away from the traditional wood products that we used to focus on. Artisan support, I mentioned that. That's our annual program in Saratoga Springs, and then the byways work. So those are the 5 programs. We have a program director for each one of those areas, except for business and community development, which is kind of, again, is cross-cutting. So agriculture, we have a lot of farms in the North Country, and we produce a lot of the state's, you know, provide a lot of the income for the state that comes from agriculture. And we are working with a number of partners in trying to promote a local food, a more sustainable local food system. It was fun being on the North Country Regional Economic Development Council, because as projects came up and as people presented project ideas at the public meetings that we've had, occasionally you'd see something and go, okay, that's a really good idea. So there were a couple of people who presented at one of the meetings in Potsdam, and it was a small project. It was funded in this $1.3 million set of grants for around $130,000. It's a mobile chicken slaughterhouse. So one of the big barriers in the North Country food economy is lack of processing units, lack of USDA approved animal processing plants. So their first phase 1 is this, they call it 2-legged, and then they're going to move to 4-legged and all of that. Again, small project, it will be transformational in terms of changing the way our local food economy can work. And you know, with the powerful movements around local food and grown local, those are the kinds of things that we're trying to capitalize on. Energy. So as of the day before yesterday, we had 2 programs. As of yesterday, now we have 3 programs from NYSERDA. We have been working with Cornell Cooperative Extension and the Energy Smart Communities. That's letting people know about a lot of the NYSERDA incentives and grants and things that are available to improve the efficiency of buildings, of residences and private sector and institutions. Recently we got the Green Jobs Green New York grant for the North Country. That's 10 counties, and that is actually going out and helping and moving people towards getting a free home energy or a low-cost home energy. We're calling it assessment rather than audit, because audit has fairly negative connotations. And then moving towards a retrofit, which also has a negative just a comprehensive home energy improvement, and that's for residences, businesses, and institutions. So that's pretty exciting. It's a whole new program. The state is going to be offering kind of creative ways of low-interest loans for people, because this program is geared to people who are fallen that income range where they can't afford to pay for the retrofit up front, and their income is too high to qualify for the lower income assistance programs that are available. So I think this is going to be fairly transformational across the state. And then yesterday we got a Cleaner Greener Communities Planning Grant, and that's something that you guys should look at, you know, to find out who got that. Every single region across the state got a NYSERDA grant, close to $1 million, and it's an 8-month process to do a comprehensive cleaner, greener communities planning process for a planning approach for renewable energy, energy efficiency and all of that. So find out who got that in your region, and it might be really worth kind of connecting with them, because it's a chunk of money. It has to be spent fast, and I think it's going to bring a lot of value to the regions. Scenic byways. So Ank has been doing scenic byways for a number of years. We have developed the corridor management plans for 7 of the scenic byways across the North Country. It's been a way for us to create a lot of connections into most of the communities. And what happens when you do a corridor management plan, we've got a consulting group now working across the, I'm holding too many things, so I can't, maybe I'll get to, I'll jump. Well, I'll explain it when we get to the map. But these are the projects that we're currently working on. I'm not sure how this formatting goes, but we've got a lot of projects, scenic byways projects underway. The top one, Experiencing Traditions, Foods, and Culture, that's really highlighting the history and culture of the whole 15 county. This is a 15 county project. And that's generating a tremendous amount of excitement, because it's giving people a sense of, we have a powerful culture, we have a food culture, we have an agricultural history that will draw and attract visitors. And it's an opportunity for people to sit down together and say, what are our assets? What do we bring to the table? The bike map, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Of accessibility assessment, that's a project that's going on in a couple of communities, making the byways and some of the scenic areas much more accessible to people who don't have the mobility that a lot of us have. Media kits for reaching people online. There's a big project going on at Whiteface Mountain, working with the Wild Center, the Natural History Museum of the Adirondacks, putting interpretive signage up, at the top of the gondola, at the top of the highway, at the weather station on top, etc. That's going to really explain and draw people into the natural history of the region, and what are they looking at, and how old are these rocks, and things like that. A lot about water. Interpretation around 3 New York State byways, and I just wanted to mention one more that's not up here. When communities have a corridor management plan in place, that gives them the opportunity to go after other funding that supports projects that are within the corridor management plan. So, for example, we wrote a grant for the town of North Elba, Lake Placid, in the last funding cycle, and were awarded, I think, the 6th largest grant in the country. It was $1.2 million to build a recreational trail, or to find, complete the amount of money that was necessary to build a recreational trail alongside the rail line between Lake Placid and Saranac Lake. So without having the corridor management plan in place, which had designated that as one of the goals, that money would not have been available. So it's a real advantage to communities to have those corridor management plans in place, and then they can move forward on implementing further things. So Bike the Byways, that was completed in June, and it's a 15 county website that's geared towards road bikers, off-road bikers, crazy mountain bikers, families, etc. And it lets you know on the site where are the bike shops, where are the great places. There's a way to comment on, for people who've been out on the bike trails, to comment on what's going on. You can check it out at bikethebyways.com, which somehow didn't show. I'm sorry, bikethebyways.org. It didn't show up at the bottom of the slide. But that's, again, it's an asset that brings people, and bike ridership is growing like crazy these days. I think there are more people who bike than who golf, tennis, and ski combined. So it's a growing recreational activity. Again, I can see you have all sorts of opportunities around here for that. Anyway, that was a big project, and it's been a real asset for tourism. Forest economy. When I came on board, I'd been working on climate change issues and environmental issues for a number of years, and just thought, you know, this area, the North Country, I think our ratio of people to trees is, I think we're about 1 million people, 1 million trees to one person. We ran that quick calculation recently. So we have a lot of trees, and many of them are not on state land, and we have a lot of well-managed forests. We produce about 1 million tons a year of the tops and trees in the cutting, you know, in the forestry process that are currently not used, and that is a huge potential to create wood chips and wood pellets. So we looked at the fact that most of our residents and many of our communities are completely dependent on number 2 heating oil. The cost of number 2 heating oil has increased by 179% in the last 10 years. How many people's budgets have gone up 179% in the last 10 years to cover that excess cost? I mean, it's killing people who are totally dependent on oil and who live in homes which are fairly inefficient. So transitioning to both doing the efficiency part and then transitioning to a wood-based heating economy is something that we're working on. You know, again, being very cognizant of sustainable management of forests, but the potential is there. A couple of examples, one of the school districts outside of the park, a little bit to the west, converted to wood chips last year. In the first year of operation, they saved $135,000 in heating, in their heating bill. How many teachers' salaries is that? In a time when school districts are having to cut and cut and cut, it's just insane to spend all that money on oil when they could be using a, you know, sustainably produced resource, renewable resource, produced and supplied from local forests. So we see that as something that's really huge, and you know, if I had more time, I'd go into detail about some of the communities that we're working with in terms of moving that forward. One of the things that we learned when we went out to our constituencies is nobody knew anything about ANCA. Who are you guys? What are you doing? We know you're up to something. So, but we don't know a lot. So, anyway, we've launched a comprehensive communications program this year. I think our emailing list has gone from about 1,200 to about 4,000 in the last 6 months or so. We produce an e-newsletter I can pass around if anybody wants to look at it. And you're welcome to give me your card and I'll put you on our mailing list. What we try to emphasize is positive stories. We always highlight you know, a person or two, talk about why they love it, why did they move to the Adirondacks or the North Country, what are they doing, how are they making their business work, et cetera, et cetera. So it's fun, you know, that comes out every 2 months, and it really tries to consolidate a lot of the good stuff that's going on in the region and make people feel like this is part of an exciting community. So that's it on the ANCA part. I'm going to talk about the Common Ground Alliance. This was something that was started about 5 or 6 years ago. Again, Lonnie Ulrich, who's now the chair of the APA, was one of the founding members, and she saw that there was people were in a logjam. The environmental groups were not talking to the local government officials except across a fence, and they were screaming at each other. Local businesses had kind of nothing to do with either group. I mean, nobody was talking, and it was and the messages that were coming to Albany from the Adirondacks were all over the map. You know, and you talk to people and they go, people in Albany, and say, what are you guys, what's going on up there? I mean, you know, we hear one thing from one person, another thing from another. They wrote us off because there was not a common message. One group wanted this, another group did not want that, they wanted this. And you know, after a while it's like, get your story straight, get what you want straight, and then come talk to us. So the way the Common Ground Alliance was structured, very, very informal. It was, the founding members were Brian Housfield, who heads up the Adirondack Council, J.R. Risley, who was head of the Adirondack Association of Towns and Villages, Lonnie, a couple of other, I mean, my predecessor at ANCA, and then a couple of people who were really, really perceived to have kind of wisdom on a number of sides, and were able to get to the core of the issue. So very small core group. I'm now part of that core group. I inherited it, but it's been a great project. The first thing that came out of so the Common Ground Alliance holds a forum in Long Lake every year, and normally 120 to 140 people attend. It's an all-day event, and the first couple of years, the first 2 years, what came out of it was something called the Blueprint for the Blue Line, and it was people working who normally were just screaming at each other, who actually came together to organize this meeting. And the goal was, okay, we know we disagree about this, we know we disagree about this, but what do we agree on? And the blueprint was a whole list of the priorities that everybody agreed on. So, energy was a key piece. We're paying too much for energy costs. Property taxes was a key element. Concern about invasives was a big issue. So there were a number of things, you know, a lack of broadband. Everybody agreed on that. That's not something you fight about. We need broadband, whether you're an environmental group or a local government official. So the blueprint came out, and that was a huge accomplishment, to have all these different people who'd been screaming at each other actually working together and agreeing on I think it was a 5-page document. This is what we agree on. This is what we can go to Albany with, that says, you know, here's who we are and here's what we stand for. Last year, when we were planning the topics at the Common Ground Alliance Forum in Long Lake, when the core team was gathered around, I had run into, there are 2 guys who've moved up from a very professional life, brought a lot of expertise and financial independence to Keene and Keene Valley, and they actually, first thing they took on was broadband. They said, oh, we don't have broadband here, we're going to make it happen. So these 2 guys made broadband happen in Keene and Keene Valley. They got a couple grants, they got a lot of community support, they had the expertise to do it. So they came to the table with this huge accomplishment, which has been, you know, high-speed connectivity for these 2 communities, which has allowed for people to move up there and live there full-time, to spend longer, you know, at their second homes if that's what they were doing, etc. Their goal was to have high-speed internet in the home of every student in the Keene Central School District. And so that allowed for getting to the last mile. Sometimes the last mile was really hard to get to. And some of these kids lived at the end of, you know, remote roads, and they achieved it. It's amazing. And they've got something like 80% uptake of broadband use across the 2 communities. One of the things that they've done in their professional life was scenario planning. Has anybody done any scenario planning in a former life? They sent me 6 draft scenarios for the Adirondack Park. They'd read a couple of books about the park and what was going on. And they went, you know, this might be an opportunity to apply scenario planning to the park. So I read those 6 scenarios, and they're all, you know, you like feel really strongly about one and go, oh, I love this one. Oh, this one cannot happen under any circumstances. Scenario planning is about, let's see if I have a slide on this. It's a way of kind of stepping away from your day-to-day concerns and looking into the future. And it's a safe place to play around with, you know, what do we want for the future? What does the future look like? And if we decide on, we want that future, what do we need to do to get there? So these go out 20 years. And they're you know, a variety of different approaches. I'm going to outline them, and I think you guys are going to have fun looking at the 6 different scenarios that have come out so far and what this whole process looks like. But this is the most recent project of the Common Ground Alliance, and I have to say that 130 people who were at the meeting in Long Lake in July last year, 90 of them signed up to participate in a 2-day workshop over the following year to refine and agree on the scenario, or the 2 scenarios that collective thinks is the right direction for the Adirondack Park to go, and that's phenomenal. That's each workshop is has about 30 people in it, and it's 2 days taking it out of their professional lives, their time, etc. So it's a pretty exciting thing, and the people were just, I mean, the energy in the tent, we have this, the forum happens in a tent, big tent outside, was palpable, you know, as these guys were presenting the 6 scenarios. So, and at the bottom, you know, scenarios are used primarily by the private sector. I used to work for a big private sector company, whose name I will not mention. And we did quite a bit of scenario planning, and it's really for, you know, situations where there's a lot of disagreement about where we're headed, why we're doing it, etc. And where there's a high degree of uncertainty. What is going to happen in the future? Nobody knows. What are the things that could affect us? And let's be open about those things. Let's not bury our head in the sand about what could happen. So the Adirondack Park was ripe for scenario planning. Anyway, the future can be quite different. Who knows what's going to happen? And you can assume it's going to go this way, but something could happen. I was just talking to who was the guy from DEP, your presenter, yeah, about the fact that, you know, increasing storms, which we're having as a result of, you know, climate change or whatever, could affect the ability of the Catskills to continue to supply water to New York City. If you have, you know, continued turbulence and all that, what are those kinds of things which might happen that could profoundly affect your future? So I'm going to run quickly through these 6 scenarios and see what you think. And at the end, everybody, when these guys were talking these things through, everybody had a little piece of paper that had a ranking form, and they were ranking it in terms of desirability, what do we want to see happen, and attainability, what do we think is more likely to happen. So, the first scenario is the wild park. The APA becomes much more dominant. Water quality and supply are core missions. The environmental groups, the NGOs become more powerful. The park is a major research center. There are very few permanent residents. It becomes really more of a traditional park without so many people living in it. That was one scenario, and I'm going through these really quickly. They have a lot more detail, but, you know, in the interest of time. So, scenario 2, the Adirondacks becomes a real destination. The brand has gotten global recognition, and people are flocking. Visitors are coming in through, there's more kind of Disney park types of things going on in the park. Wilderness areas remain, but, you know, they're more constricted. Made in the Adirondacks, manufacturing, there are a lot of, you know, activities going on where people are branding their products, etc. There's Adirondack canoe paddles and Adirondack this and Adirondack that are actually made in the Adirondacks, not in China. Environmentalists are very concerned about this scenario. It's becoming more like Florida than a wild park. Scenario C, the sustainable life. This is where rural renaissance, people are fed up with living in the city. They're moving into areas which have strong, vibrant communities, where there's a great local food economy, where there's independence in terms of energy. Village culture is very walking-oriented. The sustainable lifestyle is a bigger draw than the wilderness experience. Schools are very much involved. They're driving research in sustainability and sustainable life. And eco-friendly, ecotourism becomes a big player in this scenario. Adirondack County, this was one that I thought was really interesting. So we have the same issues you have. We've got multiple jurisdictions. We've got 2 DEC regions. We've got, 3 DOT regions. The Labor Department divides us one way, the Empire State Development divides us another way. So it's just like all these crisscrossing things. In this scenario, it's like, forget that. the Adirondack Park becomes a county, a single county with its own governance system, one school district, et cetera, and one DPW department. So state agencies realign their regions, and the 130,000 people who live there have one basically local government representative. And the fear of loss of control under that scenario actually turns out not to be true. So that was another one. So you can see how people would be going, oh, I want that one, oh, I can't stand that one. And each one of them has something in it that could be very, very valuable. The post-big government scenario. So self-reliance. I mean, you guys are probably the same way. We're so self-reliant and we have a history and a culture of self-reliance. We're going to do it ourselves. I don't know if you've been watching on what's going on in Tupper Lake. Those guys opened, the ski area was closed. They opened it on a volunteer basis. That ski area is run by volunteers. They got the chairlift up and running. They've got snow cats. I mean, it's unbelievable what they've done. They rebuilt the train station on volunteer labor. I mean, one thing after the next. So they said, we're not waiting for the government to show up, we're going to do it ourselves. So APA does fulfill its responsibility, it doesn't increase restrictions. Some areas thrive, some go away, as just like what happens in the business world. So some towns kind of basically don't make it in this scenario. And then this is a bad one. There's always a gloom and doom scenario. But you got to put it on the table. This is where invasives have overwhelmed the park, where climate change has fundamentally affected the integrity of the forests, where it's not a pristine wilderness anymore. It's been ruined, in a sense, by outside activity over which we have no control. The state, still faces problems and ends up really capping or not paying property taxes anymore. I mean, this is a bad scenario. The next generation, all the kids who are growing up and are just completely into their little, iPads and everything else, don't have any concept of the value of the wilderness experience. So that's not a value in the next generation. They don't want to vote for paying for the property taxes and all that sustain, large parts of the state. They changed the Constitution, so Article 14, which protects us and protects you, they just go, we don't need that anymore. The state declares half of the forest preserve a state forest, and the blue line shrinks. So anyway, local governments are happy to have the same wilderness before and have fewer land restrictions. I mean, this, for some, this is a good scenario, but anyway, so everybody got this. So those were the 6 scenarios. Everybody got this ranking form. So everybody, filled it out, handed it in to the 2 guys who were doing this. And over lunch, the results were tallied. And it was just absolutely amazing. They, input all the detail, all the data and everything into their computer and came out. So there's 130 people there. People who are, local government, small businesses, faith-based organizations, not-for-profits, environmental groups, government, state government officials. And they announced where everybody had ranked. Any ideas? Which one or ones came out on top? C. Almost everyone agreed that they wanted C, which is, I can't figure out how to go backwards on this. Wait. So when Dave and Jim announced this, and they've done scenario work for IBM, for the federal government, for the Department of Defense, and everything else, and they said, this has never happened before. We have never seen in our whole professional life as scenario planners that a group of people agree on one scenario. And not only did they say this is the most desirable, they also said this is the most attainable. So there's this like dead silence in the tent after this, after they made the announcement. Everybody's going, wait, I agreed with you? I never agreed with you. We agreed on this. So it was like this, it was this epiphany kind of experience where people went, we can agree on a view, on a vision, on an idea that represents the future of the Adirondack Park. So after that, that's when everybody signed up to participate in these workshops. And they're going on, they've had 3 so far, and there's another one in January. It's going to be the first one that I will have been able to attend. And they're actually going to do one in New York City with people who are, part-time residents in the park, but, mostly live in the city. And they will come back in July at the next Common Ground Alliance Forum and present the results of this whole year-long scenario process. Each one of these scenarios will have gone through a lot of refining, and in the workshops, everyone is assigned to one scenario which they defend. So even if you hate the scenario, you end up having to defend it to the group and finding out what are the pieces of each one that work. And so how do we describe one that's going to be the sort of master plan for the future? So that to me is something that is really, really working for us. And people are very excited about, there's this buzz going on about, the last scenario workshop and what came out and how much fun it is to participate. And a lot of excitement about what's going to come out in July of 2012. So let's see if I forgot anything. I just wanted to mention one other thing, kind of stepping back to the North Country Regional Council plan, having gotten one of the top 4 awards. You mentioned the APRAP survey, the APRAP project, Adirondack Park Regional Assessment Project, and ANCA and AATV were partners in that. And the data that came out of that was pretty scary. We're losing a school district every 19 months, the equivalent of a school district in kids every 19 months. We are second in aging, age of population to the west coast of Florida, and rapidly, meeting up with them. I mean, crumbling infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. When we looked at that, when I, looked at that and went, okay, that's not that different from what the rest of rural America is going through. Young kids are leaving rural areas. It's very hard to get, you've talked about that today. How do you keep younger people in there? How do you attract young people to the area? We decided to not focus on that in the North Country plan. We went, okay, we acknowledge that that's the way things are, but here are the things we're going to do, and here's what's already going on that's starting to address that. So my feeling is that kind of focusing on the negative stuff, on aging population and losing kids and all that, it doesn't get you anywhere. There's so many wonderful things. We are so lucky to live in these kinds of areas, and I think we forget that. And I think one of the things that our vision and the strategy that we outlined for the North Country was so focused on positive things and on things that are already going on, like Tupper Lake. The Saranac Lake just opened a community store. Walmart tried to come in. Walmart was beat out by the community, but people said, but we don't want to have to drive to Plattsburgh every time we need to buy a new pair of underwear. 5 years later, at $100 a share, the community opened up a community store, which is run by and owned by the community. And you can go in there and buy a pair of, set of underwear, sheets, knitting stuff, baby clothes, etc. And people can say, hey, we need this. And the people who are managing the store will go out and get that. So those kinds of things are happening, and I'm sure they're happening here. I mean, I've heard some of them. And those are the things I think you need to focus on, and it brings people together around. We have a bright common future as opposed to the world is coming to an end. So that is the end of my presentation.
And
yes.
yes, we've been working towards a Catskill Interpretive Center, and I visited the Adirondack Interpretive Centers. There was one in Newcomb and then one up by Paul Smith's College.
Mhm.
Do you know what the state of those are? Because I'd heard they'd closed, or,
Yeah.
or what is the story?
The APA was funding those, and that funding was stopped. So Paul Smith's, the one in outside of Paul Smith's, is the one I'm more familiar with. They have, the Adirondack Writers Institute has moved in there. They have come up with some very creative ways of using the space. And there's some new project that's going in there, and I absolutely cannot remember it, but it's pretty exciting.
So they're
So they are,
using, well, it's very close to the college there. The one in Newcomb was on a remote kind of.
right.
It had a nature area around.
Yeah, yeah. No, those are real assets for the community. You know, the cross-country ski trails and snowshoeing trails and all of that. But there's some adaptive reuse going on that's pretty interesting, at least in the one outside of Paul Smith.
So there's no plans to reopen as an interpretive center?
I don't think so.
Has that function been cut off? I mean, there were exhibits and things. Are they still intact?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're doing with that, but it's a great space. You know, I think the Wild Center came along and did
Something like that.
something like that,
Yeah.
which is a much more kind of 21st century experience of interpretation, although it costs money to be a member and go. But anyway, but there's some things like that that are going on where people are saying, okay, well, instead of just accepting that they're going to close this, let's figure out what else we can do with it. So any other questions? I buzzed through this really fast, but we're having fun and we're totally excited. I can't wait to get up and read the press today about the North Country being one of the top 4 ranked plans in the state. I think it's unprecedented, but it just shows that even if you're completely rural, we have 2 small cities, Plattsburgh and Watertown, that's it. The rest looks like this. And they gave us the money.
Is there a way that you can, I mean, obviously we can contact the Catskill Center for your information, contact information, but do you have a card?
So our website is adirondack.org and my email address is kfish@adirondack.org. And we're happy to put you on the newsletter distribution list and any other things that are going on. So thank you very much.